Good morning, it's Gene from the Mavestar Observatory. Guys, I'm going to do something a little bit different in this video. We're going to discuss some facts, and you know what a fact is. It's an absolute truth, so there's no denying that what we're going to look at are absolute truths. Before we get into that, I just want to thank our patrons and those people that do a one-off PayPal donation, and of course all those people that are looking after the equipment that we've got out there in the field already around the world. So let's begin. Yesterday I just briefly mentioned what I thought would be a good idea, to get a yacht, to avoid any up and coming events where we would have a similar situation, what a grid down would create. We're talking about avoiding the consequences of social collapse globally, and we also talked about land going offline as a result of climate changing. And what I wanted to discuss is a little bit more along the lines of what my idea was with that, the yacht, getting some more people that were like-minded possibly, and more than anything, guys, it's just sharing of ideas. What we have to do first of all, I think, is look at the facts, and then I think we have to make some decisions on what we want to do about the future. And if there are implications which we face which are life-threatening, then we should discuss what, even if it's just ideas, we should just discuss many ideas to see which is the best plan for such an event. So I wanted to begin with the last 3 solar cycles that we're looking at right now, and we're at the end of solar cycle 24, but you can clearly see that over the last 33 years, since 1985 to 2020, sunspots have been dropping off, and as a result of sunspots dropping off, we know that every time it goes into the trough at the end of the solar cycle, during the solar minimum, cosmic radiation increases. And as a result of the 3 solar cycles over the last 33 years or thereabouts, we've seen, as we've seen an exponential decrease in sunspot numbers, we've seen an exponential increase in cosmic radiation. So we know that these are facts. We also know now, and it should be clear as daylight to anybody that has been listening to, what the governments and organisations have been doing with regards to blaming CO2 and global warming and climate change now on human activity, is a fast. There is no evidence to support that whatsoever. We've seen them manipulate the data and cherry pick parts out of that data and completely omit the data that goes back to the medieval warm period, which proves that there are warm periods in our history and there are cold periods in our history. We also yesterday, if you watched the video, saw that we was entering that line between an interglacial period and a glacial period, and we know that sunspots do drive and solar activity does drive the climate on this planet. It should come as no surprise to anyone that that is a fact. At the end of the day, if there is more CO2 in the atmosphere, then everything that relies on CO2 for its progressive production, such as all the vegetation on this planet and those microcellular life forms like zooplankton in the seas and oceans, all depend on carbon dioxide. So if there is more of that in the atmosphere, then obviously these things are going to thrive, as they have done in the history of the Earth. I'd just like to show these charts again. Over on the left, you might have seen the banner that's appearing under my videos when we talk about anything to do with CO2 or global warming. Wikipedia put one of their banners under the videos, not just on my videos but on everybody's that's talking about CO2. So there's a big concerted effort to try and make us look like lunatics. But I've drawn a banner on the left hand chart that starts at 1880. You can see that red line that I've drawn, and I've put that red line where they've took the data from on the chart on the right hand side. And you can see they start their data from 1880 onwards, and you can see that there's a warming trend taking place. Well, You know, if you're going to start your data from a point like this and exclude all the temperatures that are on the right hand side of the chart before that, then it's going to look like, you know, a convincing argument to support that CO2 could be likely to cause all the changes in our climate right now, and such as the things that they come out with, like global warming. But just take a look on the right hand chart at where the medieval warm period is, and you can see that during this warm period the Vikings arrived in Greenland, which means that it must have been able to sustain, you know, a colonisation at that point in time. But 400 years later, or just short of 400 years later, the end of the Viking colonisation of Greenland ended. And that's just a temperature change of about 1.5 degrees Celsius that led to that. But the main point is that they've cherry-picked the data and they've omitted the warmer periods that have happened. And the point is this: there was no industrial revolution taking place 1,000 years ago, clearly, yet the climate had, as you can see from 0 on the right hand chart, warmed to the point where the medieval period was noted. After the continuation of the colonisation, when the Vikings left Greenland, you can see that it continued to go down, the temperature did, and we see the Little Ice Age mentioned there. It's also noted that during the Little Ice Age there was no sunspots for around 50 years. So what they did is clearly manipulate the data to support their claims, and they've raised trillions of pounds globally as a result of this, guys. And this is all about money for them. And, you know, can you imagine? There is nothing really, even if CO2 was responsible for the changing climate, what could the raising of trillions of pounds actually do to change that? What have they actually spent this money on? So the point is this: you know, every government around the world, or almost every government around the world, has jumped on the bandwagon of global warming, CO2 taxes, raising trillions of pounds, and it's nothing short of a scam that has taken place. And there's been a lot of money taken from the general public as a result of that. But we are clearly facing times like the Vikings did when they arrived, when they left Greenland, with the temperatures dropping on this planet. And as a result, I suppose why the Vikings left Greenland was because, you know, the land no longer sustained that colonisation. I'm not 100% certain of the amount of crops that we're losing and arable land that we're losing on this planet, but we do hear more often than not now of farmers not getting the crops out the ground in time, and crop losses as a result of, you know, this spontaneous climatic change. All I know is that there is a lot of people on this planet, and I know clearly that there is a concerted effort to, you know, reduce the numbers of people on this planet, as opposed to put in place measures that could sustain the amount of people that are on this planet right now. So they would rather than fix the problem, they would rather, you know, take the easier route and remove the amounts of people on this planet. As a result, we have clearly seen, you know, I'm not going to mention names, but if you do your research, you will find there is efforts to curb the expanding populations on this planet by forcibly indoctrinating drugs and chemicals which make them infertile, and they're doing it without even the consent of these people in these regions on this planet. This, if you research it, guys, is definitely taking place. If ever you want to gauge how well your city is doing or your country is doing, then look at the amount of people that have committed suicide in the last year look at the amount of people that are taking drugs in the last year and whether that's on the increase, and look at the amount of homeless people there are, and look at the amount of people that have a drink related problem. I live in central England, on the border of Coventry, and I was talking to someone that manages people with addiction problems, and they told me that 1 in 3 people in Coventry, I think there's a population of just short of probably 800, maybe 1 million people, but 1 in 3 people have a problem with just alcohol alone. But I know people will think, oh, these are alcoholics before they ended up on the street, but most of these people became alcoholics and drug addicts whilst they was on the street. I'll tell you about an experiment that was conducted. You can find this on TED Talk, those like documentaries on TED. You'll find it on YouTube if you want to have a look. It's about an experiment related to addiction and what we don't know about addiction. And some scientist put a rat in a room with a water bottle laced with cocaine, and there was nothing else in that room for it. And he also put in the room an ordinary bottle of water, and apparently the rat would constantly drink the one with cocaine in it. And I think the reason for that is because, as we're going to find out in just a few moments, is the conditions that the rat was in. There was nothing better to do, and it was obviously getting something more out of the laced water with cocaine in it than it was the other, because they got the same experiment in a room. This time they'd built a rat park, and there was everything in this park, different types of food, lots of other rats. It was rat paradise almost, and they laced 2 bottles, one with normal water, one with cocaine again, and the rat barely ever touched the one with cocaine in it. So circumstances of it's not just a case of rats. Humans are exactly the same, and this is why in this talk, on this TED talk, tries to explain that there's something we don't understand about addiction. But you can imagine if you're on the streets, or how you first of all came to be on the streets. You probably got told one day your job was going, and that meant you hadn't got any rent money in the foreseeable future. So you might have been lucky enough to have a credit card which you used, to pay your rent for a few months, but that would have soon expired if you weren't able to get a job. And of course the landlord's going to knock on the door one day and say, you've got to vacate the property because you're not paying your rent. At that point, if you've got no family, no friends, then you've got nowhere to turn to for help. You haven't got a job to participate in the monetary system. You're very likely going to find yourself in a situation like some of these people that you see before you. And apparently, according to statistics, most of us are probably just 1 or 2 paychecks away from being in that situation. So what I'm saying is, the society is failing people in this modern day and age, and we are struggling to keep up on that wheel, which is ever more turning faster and faster. And it's a result of our technological advancement. What's happened is, over the last 20-30 years, is there has been a lot of labour intensive jobs removed by technology, but the population has continued to expand. And our governments have failed to combat this situation with something reasonable, that all of us can still participate in a system, even though it is by no fault of their own find themselves out of work. In this country we subsidise farmers not to rear certain animals such as lambs and things like that, but it's never called a benefit. It's a subsidy purposely given to farmers to not rear the cattle so that the imports can come in. That's bizarre. But the point is, they'll never subsidise somebody that can't get a job with a reasonable amount of livable income. Again, this is how our system is failing, just on one level, guys. Our system is failing right now on a multitude of levels. Our climate is changing, that's a fact. Our arable land is shrinking where we grow our crops, and we do have people in power that want to reduce the numbers of the population of this earth dramatically, and that's clear. And we also have these psychopaths that want to keep the monetary system in place. We've found recently, guys, the blatant lies with regards to CO2 coming out now more clearly and more regularly, and we also have found that they are trying to combat those people that are delivering the truth to you guys out there. We do face some serious times ahead. It is likely that we are going to go back into a glacial period, and it's part of a natural cycle of the Earth and the solar system that we live in. But the major point here is that most people are unaware of the situations that are taking place. They're unaware that the government are lying about CO2, and they're unaware about the real causes of climatic change on this planet. And as a result, we could find ourselves in a situation, like I said in yesterday's video, where people panic because there isn't food in the shops, or they're outpriced in buying that food, and social unrest begins. It probably start off in one country and then spread throughout the entire earth. We see that this problem with relationship to keeping up with demand for crops is not just related to one country. We've seen in the United States some farmers not get the crops out the ground, and I do take on board what someone said in the comment section yesterday about this. It's not uncommon for this time of the year to experience cold temperatures, and most farmers get their crops out in mid-October. But what I'm saying is that some farmers in some regions were unable to do that, and as a result this will have an effect on their income, and it will have an effect on the total output of food production in the United States, and that in turn will have knock-on effects around the world because of how large the United States is of a producer of food globally. So guys, in just sharing ideas here, nothing more. I know that a lot of you have probably got your bug out plans ready for mass social unrest, and that's really what frightens me, mass social unrest, because I've seen in our history what we're capable of during times of desperation. If people are starving, and they're going to die anyhow, there's not going to be a conscience in killing another person for their food or belongings. And if these people go out in large groups to people that have supplies, then it's only going to be a matter of time that you can protect yourselves against these people, because the masses will win in the day, in the end of the day. If you're forced to stay within your borders and you can't migrate to lands that are more fertile for sustainable life for you and others, then you're going to perish where you are. And I'm just saying that there is a small possibility that we could face that because of the amount of different aspects right now we faced. I think we're in a lot of risk, and that's why I talk about this, guys. My idea yesterday wasn't viewed as very practical by a lot of you, but I said, if you're on land, you're trapped within the borders of that land. It might not be fertile growing land, and just as an alternative, I thought perhaps if there was more like-minded people that got together and shared something like what we're looking at here, an 8-berth yacht, and 6 people per yacht. We used probably one of the rooms as a bedroom or storage room for food, and if there was a small flotilla of these boats, you could protect yourself against pirates and things like that. It's just an idea that I'm putting out there, guys. I'm just saying that there is more people on land than there is on the sea, and that during that critical period of time, it might just give you the edge on everybody else. You can, as you can imagine, if the globe goes into total meltdown, and is there a possibility of that? I think so. I think if we go back into another glacial period, it's going to affect everybody on this planet. And there is, I think, the majority of people that live in the northern hemisphere that will be affected the greatest. I know that some people think, oh, we've got the infrastructure to deal with such a scenario, but we clearly don't. And it's only a matter of time if we do slip back into, a glacial period, that, the power lines wouldn't sustain the ice. We're just not geared up for it, full stop. If the power lines go down, we end up with a grid down situation. There's a lot of different aspects to this, of a failing society within a city. I just see that these are the vulnerable hotspots that are going to create the biggest problem for us. I was just putting the idea out there that there's another alternative to a group of you getting together armed with supplies to look after yourself. You could also do it on the ocean as well, with a small flotilla of about 8 boats. If you was all armed, then I'm sure you could fight off the 1 or 2 pirates that would probably challenge you. I just think there'd be less risks on the ocean, and there'd be less borders that you could evade, and you could probably, after a period of time of upheaval, relocate somewhere where things have calmed down a little bit more. What you got to remember is that probably the first month or so is probably going to be the worst in any one of these situations, and I think we should talk about this, guys. We shouldn't just put this off, because I say many times in these videos that we face many obstacles on this gauntlet that we are now on. Clearly we are now on. The climate is changing. It's not because of CO2, it's because of a grand solar minimum, a magnetic pole reversal, and an influx of cosmic radiation. So we can see, and all we can do right now, I know a lot of people aren't going to move until it's actually hit them in the face, and I think if you wait till that point, then it's too late already. I think we really need to seriously weigh up the risks, and there are clearly, as a fact, a lot of risks. That's the truth of the matter. And I think we need to start sharing ideas. This might not be for you. You might have your plans. I'm just merely putting an idea out there, something I thought of avoiding the mass numbers. So don't attack me for that. It's just a sharing of an idea. Might not be the best idea, but at least it's something on the table to think about. I have heard a lot of you putting up small provisions for yourselves, small bug out bags, and that's fine. If you can keep your head down and avoid the people that have not got things, then you'll be okay. I'm pretty sure you'll be okay. But what you got to remember is, in a world where there's the majority of have-nots and the ones that have, they're going to break the rules. They're going to break the laws. They're not going to abide by the laws, and they're going to just forcibly take at that position. When they're faced with life or death, that's what's going to be the case. So, we're just merely sharing ideas today with you guys. That's all. But I'd like to see what your ideas are down in the comment section. Not just on, a flotilla of about 8 yachts with 6 people on board each, armed with supplies, moving about. It could be, getting in a little community, or finding yourself, out in the middle of nowhere. You'll just let us know. Anyway, guys, we do, as well as talk about such matters, we do a lot of other things on this channel. We actually don't just always talk about it. We actually try to be more proactive in building equipment, getting it out there in the field, so we can get some data back and get some facts, some truths of the situation, and try and monitor it so that we know what we are up against. And if you want to be part of supporting that, then there are links down there, and that's all I've got to say on that. I'll leave it with you guys. I'll catch up with you perhaps in the week sometime. Have a great weekend, and as always, bye for now.